I'm Riley, 28 male. My life used to be measured in routines, early morning runs, weapon maintenance, mission briefings. Now it's measured in dollars I can't spend and secrets I can't tell, all from a penthouse apartment that feels more like a prison than a home. I was a decorated Army Ranger, a husband, and an expectant father, but one mission took all of that away, replacing it with a fortune that cost me everything that ever mattered. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. The alarm never had a chance. My body knew 4:30 a.m. better than any clock. It was a rhythm drilled into me over 8 years in the Rangers, a discipline that civilian life hadn't yet managed to erase. Beside me, my wife Melinda would stir, pulling a pillow over her head with a soft groan. "You're not in the sandbox anymore, Riley," she'd murmur, her voice thick with sleep. She was right, but the pre-dawn silence and the burn in my lungs from a 5-mile run were my meditation, the only way I knew how to start a day. Our house in Colorado Springs was the definition of ordinary. A simple ranch-style home with 3 bedrooms, a garage that needed its seals replaced, and a yard that was patiently waiting for the dog we always talked about getting. It wasn't a mansion, but it was the physical manifestation of our life together, built with my deployment bonuses and her salary as a third-grade teacher. The interior of that house was our timeline, a gallery of our shared history. Every wall and shelf held a piece of our story. There was a photo of my unit in Kandahar, grinning in front of a captured weapons cache, all of us young and invincible. Another captured our wedding day on the grounds of Fort Carson, the Colorado wind catching Melinda's veil and making it fly. I looked at my Ranger school graduation picture and barely recognized the lane, exhausted kids staring back. The most recent addition, the one that meant the most, was a tiny, grainy ultrasound photo held to the fridge by a magnet shaped like a pair of combat boots. That little black and white image represented a 3-year battle, 3 years of hope and disappointment month after month. Melinda had started to internalize the struggle, convincing herself something was broken. I'd find her some nights sitting on the edge of the tub, another negative test in her hand. "Maybe it's just not in the cards for us," she'd whisper. I'd hold her and tell her that our time would come. The phone call that changed everything came on a Tuesday afternoon. I was in the middle of a training exercise when my phone buzzed. It was Melinda, and she was crying so hard I initially thought there had been a tragedy. Then through the sobs I heard the words, "I'm pregnant, Riley, we're having a baby." It was pure, unfiltered joy. When I told my younger brother Colton, he nearly fell off the creeper he was using to slide under a car. He wiped a greasy hand on his jeans and laughed. "It's about damn time," he said. "Now you can boss someone else around for a change." Colton was the one who stayed home, running a small auto repair shop that catered to folks who couldn't afford dealership prices. He'd always said the military heroics were my department, but I knew the truth. He stayed to look after our parents, a duty he carried quietly and without complaint. My father, Vernon, was a Vietnam vet. The war had claimed his left arm and much of his hearing, but it never touched his spirit. Every Sunday, I'd drive him to the local VFW post. He'd sit at his usual table with his usual beer and tell his well-worn stories. But his demeanor would shift the moment I walked in wearing my uniform. He'd sit up straighter, his eyes would light up, and he'd tap the Ranger tab on my shoulder with his good hand. "Rangers lead the way," he'd declare, loud enough for the whole bar to hear. The other veterans, men who understood the unspoken weight of that service, would raise their glasses in a silent salute. My mother, Diane, lived with a quiet fear that never quite left her eyes. She'd pack us sandwiches for those VFW trips, always cutting the crusts off just like she did when we were kids. "Serving your country is an honorable thing, Riley," she'd say, her gaze drifting to my dad's empty sleeve. "But coming home is what matters. This family has already given enough." I was on my final deployment, with only 6 weeks standing between me and the life I'd been fighting for, 42 days until I could trade my rifle for a baby carrier. Melinda was 5 months along and sent me daily updates, tracking the baby's growth with a Fruit of the Week app. "Our baby is the size of a mango this week," one message read, attached to a photo of her beautiful, expanding belly. The nursery was already planned out. I'd picked a solid oak crib that would convert into a toddler bed. My squadmate Jameson, a man with a knack for spatial design, had helped me sketch out the entire room's layout on a napkin during a long night on watch. Every detail was accounted for. My separation papers were filed. A security job in Denver was waiting for me, good pay, stable hours, and home for dinner every single night. It was the American dream, neatly packaged and ready to unwrap. Then on October 14th, the mission briefing dropped. It was a classified operation, volunteer only, with hazard pay attached. After the main briefing, my CO, Major Briggs, pulled me aside. "Brennan," he said, his expression serious, "you have a family on the way. Nobody would think less of you if you sat this one out. But that wasn't how I was wired. Rangers don't sit on the sidelines. We see the mission through. We come home with our shield or on it. With just 6 weeks left until freedom, I couldn't bring myself to say no to one last run. One final mission that promised to change everything in ways I could never have imagined. The mission was presented as a straightforward facility inspection, a routine task in the rugged mountains near Herat. Intelligence pointed to an old, abandoned Soviet chemical depot from the 1980s, one of many such sites littering the Afghan landscape. We de-run this playbook a dozen times. Infiltrate, document any materials, photograph serial numbers for the record, and call in the disposal teams. It was supposed to be a simple in-and-out operation, 4 hours tops, and back to base before nightfall. But from the very beginning, something felt off. The first red flag was in the briefing room. Two men in civilian attire sat silently in the corner. They were never formally introduced, their presence never explained. They just watched us, their eyes cold and analytical. They weren't soldiers, but they moved with the quiet confidence of seasoned operators, the kind of men whose existence is officially denied. They were ghosts, and they were coming with us. The second red flag appeared 12 clicks from our objective. A massive IED detonated directly under our MRAP, launching the multi-ton vehicle into the air. It felt like being inside a tin can kicked by a giant. The world became a violent, tumbling chaos of metal, gear, and bodies. When the motion finally stopped, I was hanging upside down by my safety harness, the metallic taste of blood in my mouth. Miraculously, all 6 of us in the vehicle were alive. Standard operating procedure was clear. An IED meant the mission was compromised. We were supposed to abort and return to base. But one of the contractors, the one we'd unofficially nicknamed Smith, was already out of the wreck, weapon ready. "We proceed on foot," he stated, his voice devoid of emotion. It wasn't a suggestion, it was an order. I protested, helping my squadmate Jameson free another soldier from the tangled wreckage. "That's a breach of protocol," I said. The other contractor, Jones, just looked at me. "Your protocol is irrelevant here," he replied flatly. Smith made a brief call on a satellite phone, then turned back to us. "Command confirms the mission is time-sensitive, we move." Against my better judgment, we pushed forward. It was me, Jameson, and 2 other Rangers from my unit, Rodriguez and Chen, accompanied by our 2 mysterious shadows. The facility was a relic of the Cold War, a brutalist concrete structure carved directly into the mountainside. Faded Cyrillic warnings were still visible on the heavy blast doors. The moment we breached the entrance, my instincts screamed that something was wrong. The layer of dust on the floor wasn't uniform, it had been recently disturbed. There were fresh scratches on the door mechanisms. Someone had been inside this abandoned facility within the last few days. I signaled for the team to halt, but Smith ignored me, pushing past and heading deeper into the darkness. "We're on a tight schedule," he muttered. As we descended to the 3rd subterranean level, the facility's automated systems flickered to life. The technology was a bizarre hybrid of old Soviet hardware and modern upgrades. I saw new Samsung chips crudely soldered onto decades-old circuit boards. Then a thick yellow gas began to hiss from vents in the ceiling. It was oily and dense, clinging to the air and descending upon us. "Masks on," I yelled, pulling my gas mask over my face. We were all equipped for a chemical environment, but a mask is only a temporary shield when you're breathing an unknown agent. Our 2 guides, however, knew exactly what they were doing. They moved with a purpose that defied the idea of a simple inspection. They navigated the labyrinthine corridors without hesitation, without consulting a map. They had been here before. They led us directly to a specific storage chamber and began pulling heavy metal cases from the shelves, cross-referencing serial numbers with a list on a handheld device. The yellow gas was now rising from the floor, pooling around our boots like a toxic fog. "We have to get out of here now," Rodriguez yelled through his mask, his voice strained with panic. That was when Smith drew his sidearm and aimed it steadily at Rodriguez. "We need 5 more minutes," he said, his voice dangerously calm. Jameson started to move towards him, but Jones already had his own weapon drawn. 4 minutes and 45 seconds, Smith counted down casually, as if we were merely waiting for a bus. We were prisoners in a poisoned chamber, held at gunpoint by our own side. Those minutes felt like an eternity. The contractors methodically loaded 6 of the metal cases into specialized satchels while we stood by, helpless. My eyes burned and the seal on my mask felt inadequate against the acrid fumes. Through the thick glass of his visor, I saw Chen start to cough, a fine spray of blood misting the inside of his mask. The situation was deteriorating rapidly. Then, a deep rumble started from below us. It was a secondary explosion, one I would later learn was a fail-safe, triggered by the removal of a specific case without the correct disarming code. The floor beneath our feet didn't just crack, it disintegrated. The 100-year-old Soviet concrete turned to dust in an instant. I remember the sensation of falling, of being swallowed by darkness, surrounded by a storm of debris. The air was a choking mixture of the yellow gas, smoke, and pulverized concrete. During the fall, a piece of exposed rebar, rusted and sharp, tore through both of my legs just above the knees. The pain was so immediate and overwhelming that it short-circuited my brain, turning into a wave of pure, white-hot noise. The world went black. I woke up adrift in a sea of morphine, my body disconnected from my mind. The last thing I remembered was falling, the shriek of tearing metal and an all-consuming pain. Now there was only a dull, persistent ache and the sterile smell of a hospital. I was in a military medical center in Germany. It took a few moments for my eyes to focus on the man sitting by my bedside. He wore an immaculate black suit that seemed out of place among the medical equipment. He introduced himself as Holloway, though the name felt as generic and disposable as his suit. His eyes never quite met mine. They were constantly scanning the room, assessing angles and exits. He was a federal agent, no doubt about it. He slid a thick contract across the tray table that rested over my bed. At the top, printed on official Department of Defense letterhead, was a number, $278 million. So many zeros, my drug-addled mind couldn't fully comprehend the sum. "Take your time to review the document, Staff Sergeant Brennan," Holloway said, his voice a flat, bureaucratic monotone. He explained that all I needed to do was sign in a few places and that staggering amount of money would be mine. It was a life-altering sum, enough to ensure that I, my parents, my brother, and my future child would never have to worry about money again. But my training had taught me to always read the fine print. Buried deep within the legal jargon, in paragraph 47, subsection C, was the catch. By signing, I would agree to never disclose the true events of the mission. The official story was to be an IED explosion during a routine patrol. Unfortunate, but a common casualty of war. The contract explicitly forbade me from mentioning the yellow gas that I could still feel burning in my chest. The American-made chemical weapons we discovered in that Soviet facility, or the two government contractors who had held us at gunpoint while they secured evidence of a war crime. This gag order wasn't just for the public, it was absolute. I couldn't tell the other survivors, the therapists who would be tasked with helping me navigate my trauma, or even my own family. I couldn't even tell Melinda, the woman who, just hours before Holloway's arrival, had stood in this very room. Her pregnant belly was a beautiful round curve under her sundress, and tears streamed down her face as she told me she couldn't marry half a man. She had left her wedding ring on the bedside table, a small gold circle that now seemed to mock me. She deserved the truth about why her husband came home broken, but this contract would buy my silence. I thought about everything I had just 3 days ago, 8 years of distinguished service as an Army Ranger, a loving wife carrying our first child, and a future that was bright and full of promise. Now I was a patient in a German hospital with 2 stumps where my legs used to be, a broken engagement, and a government agent offering me a fortune to live a lie. My throat was raw from the ventilator they'd recently removed, but I managed to ask, "What happens if I refuse to sign?" Holloway adjusted his cufflinks, a small, deliberate movement that felt like a veiled threat. "You'll receive standard veteran benefits, Staff Sergeant," he explained coolly. A D. Stability rating of 60, perhaps 70% if you find a competent advocate. The VA will issue you standard issue prosthetics, functional for walking but not much more. Your rehabilitation will be at a facility with a 16-month waitlist. Your ex-fiancé and your child will receive only the minimum dependent benefits. He paused and pulled out a tablet, tapping the screen. He showed me a live video feed of Melinda shopping for groceries with her mother back in Colorado. The timestamp was from less than 2 hours ago. They were watching her. "Of course," Holloway continued, his tone unchanging, "we strongly prefer your willing cooperation. We believe the men and women who serve this country should be compensated for their sacrifices, particularly when those sacrifices involve sensitive materials that officially do not exist. Think of this as an insurance policy, Sergeant, for you, for your family, for everyone." The unspoken part of his message was deafeningly clear. Sign the contract, take the money, and everyone you love remains safe. Refuse and the world becomes a very dangerous place for a veteran struggling with PTSD. He then informed me that the other surviving members of my unit, Jameson, Rodriguez, and Chen, would each be presented with similar, tailored offers. However, he added, these offers are contingent upon full participation. If a single member of the unit refuses, the program becomes difficult to implement. It wasn't just a bribe, it was blackmail. He was using my brothers in arms as leverage. If I refused, I wouldn't just be condemning myself to a difficult life. I would be robbing them of their only chance at security. As a nurse entered to check my IV, she shot a nervous glance at Holloway before quickly averting her eyes. Everyone here knew who these men in black suits were. They were the fixers, the cleaners, the men who appeared when soldiers saw things they were never meant to see. Holloway stood up, smoothing his jacket. "You have 24 hours, Staff Sergeant Brennan." After that, this offer and any record of this conversation will cease to exist. He placed the contract on my bedside table, right next to Melinda's abandoned ring. Two documents, one representing a past I had lost, the other representing a future built on a lie. 2 months later, I was at Walter Reed National Military Medical Center, a place where heroes are rebuilt piece by piece. My days were a grueling cycle of pain, sweat, and frustration as I learned to walk on a pair of advanced prosthetics that cost more than my parents' house. My physical therapist was a former Marine named Angela, a woman with a zero-tolerance policy for self-pity. "Pain is weakness leaving the body, Brennan," she'd bark as I struggled on the parallel bars. "I thought you Rangers were supposed to be tough." It was during one of these sessions that Mr. Holloway reappeared. He walked into the therapy room as if he owned it, dressed in the same anonymous black suit. His presence immediately changed the atmosphere. Even Angela, a woman who feared nothing, fell silent and quietly excused herself after a single, cold glance from him. His power was palpable and unnerving. "Staff Sergeant Brennan," he began, settling into Angela's vacant chair. "There have been some developments regarding the October 14th incident." He produced the same tablet as before, unlocking it with a series of biometric scans. The first image he showed me was a newspaper clipping from the San Francisco Chronicle. It was an obituary for Chen, one of my squadmates who had survived the blast. "Suicide," Holloway stated, his voice clinical. "He jumped from the Golden Gate Bridge last week. The note he left mentioned a severe struggle with PTSD. My blood ran cold. Chen was one of the most mentally resilient soldiers I had ever known. He wouldn't just give up." Holloway swiped the screen, revealing another image: Rodriguez, another survivor, lying in a hospital bed hooked up to a tangle of life support machines. "A tragic car accident," Holloway explained. "He drove his vehicle into a concrete abutment at 90 miles per hour. The police found no skid marks. He's been in a coma for 6 days." I told him he was lying, but the words came out as a weak whisper. Deep down, I knew he was telling the truth. "The chemical agent your unit was exposed to has demonstrated unforeseen long-term neurological effects," Holloway continued, his tone like a doctor delivering a terminal diagnosis. "Paranoia, severe depression, and eventually a total breakdown of the central nervous system, unless of course one receives the proper countermeasures." He let the words hang in the air before producing a new contract, this one even thicker than the first. It detailed the same $278 million payment, but with an added clause: lifetime medical coverage. This wasn't just any coverage. It promised access to experimental treatments, including neural inhibitors that could halt the Michael deterioration that was apparently killing my friends. "All that is required," he said, "is your continued adherence to the established narrative." I had to know, "What really happened in that facility?" I asked, my voice barely audible. For the first time, Holloway smiled. It was a thin, predatory expression that didn't reach his eyes. "You encountered an IED on a routine patrol," he recited. "The facility you were tasked to inspect was empty. Your unit found nothing of consequence. And the men you refer to as Smith and Jones do not exist in any official records." My thoughts spiraled. I thought of Melinda and the baby she was carrying. In our last phone call, she had made her position painfully clear. "I can't be a caregiver to a husband and a newborn at the same time, Riley. I won't do that to our child." I thought of my parents, my father's health failing, and my mother working at Walmart to make ends meet. I thought of my brother Colton, who had put his own life and business on hold to sleep in a hospital chair by my side for weeks. They were all struggling, and I had the means to save them, but at what cost? "I need proof," I said, my voice hardening. "I need to know that Jameson gets the same deal." Without missing a beat, Holloway pulled up a digital copy of Jameson's contract on his tablet. Jameson's signature was already on the dotted line, dated the previous day. "He was very motivated to secure his daughter's financial future," Holloway commented casually. "As you know, her special needs require very expensive, ongoing treatments." That was the moment I truly understood the depth of their operation. They hadn't just researched us, they had dissected our lives. They knew every vulnerability, every emotional pressure point, every person we loved. This was never about buying our silence, it was about owning our souls. I looked at Holloway, the architect of this impossible choice. He was offering me a golden key to a gilded cage. He could give me life, health, and unimaginable wealth. In return, all he wanted was my truth. The 24-hour deadline he had given me in Germany felt like a distant memory, a courtesy that was no longer on the table. "You told me I had 24 hours, I reminded him, clinging to that last sliver of autonomy. Holloway's empty smile returned. "That was before Sergeant Chen's unfortunate choice and Sergeant Rodriguez's accident," he said, rising from his chair. "The situation has become more time-sensitive. You now have 1 hour." The walls of the therapy room seemed to close in. 1 hour to decide the fate of my future, my health, and my family's security. "Sign or don't sign," he continued, his voice chillingly indifferent. But I urge you to understand that without our specialized treatment, the chemical exposure will progress. Perhaps you'll drive into a bridge, or perhaps you'll jump off one. In either scenario, your child will grow up without a father. A desperate question clawed its way up my throat. If I sign, can I see my daughter? Holloway considered this for a moment, as if weighing a minor logistical detail. From a distance, perhaps, he conceded. Direct contact would be an unacceptable security risk. However, we can facilitate anonymous trust funds, university scholarships, and other financial instruments to ensure she is well cared for throughout her life. He placed the thick contract on the bench next to me and walked toward the door. He paused with his hand on the handle, turning back for one final devastating statement. You have 1 hour, Sergeant. I suggest you think carefully about the legacy you wish to leave. Will it be that of a decorated war hero whose family was financially secure for generations? Or that of a broken veteran who couldn't cope with civilian life and left his family with nothing but questions and debt? The door clicked shut, the sound echoing in the silent room like a gavel falling on a final judgment. I was alone, the heavy document resting beside me, its pages filled with lies that promised life. Through the large window of the therapy room, I could see the hospital grounds. I watched other soldiers, other amputees, fighting for every single step on their own prosthetic limbs. They were heroes who had come home to parades and proud families. Their sacrifices were clear, their stories uncomplicated by chemical weapons and government conspiracies. Their children would grow up knowing their fathers were heroes. What would my daughter know of me? Would she know a father who chose money over integrity? Or would she never know me at all, just a name on a tombstone? The weight of it all was crushing. Jameson had already signed. He had chosen his daughter's well-being over the truth. Could I blame him? Could I in good conscience choose a path of righteous poverty that would not only condemn me to a painful death but also leave my entire family to struggle? The minutes ticked by, each one a hammer blow aga. And esteem my resolve. I thought of my father's pride, my mother's worry, Colton's sacrifice, and the tiny unborn baby who deserved a life free from the burdens I now carried. The choice was a monstrous one, a decision between two different kinds of death, a slow physical decay or an immediate spiritual one. I was trapped. Every possible path led to a profound loss. They had engineered the situation perfectly, leaving me with no viable alternative but to comply. They had threatened my friends, my family, and my own life. They had turned my sense of duty and my love for my family into weapons to be used against me. With 2 minutes left on Holloway's clock, I reached for the pen. My hand was shaking, not from weakness but from the sheer weight of the surrender. As I signed my name, Riley Brennan, on the signature line, I knew I wasn't just signing a legal document. I was signing away my past, my identity, and my soul. Each letter I formed was another bar in the golden cage they had built just for me. The contract was a death certificate for the man I used to be. The money appeared in my new, specially created bank account less than an hour after I signed the contract. The transfer was instantaneous and silent. One moment the account was empty, the next it held $278 million. The bank's branch manager called me personally, his voice full of feigned warmth, to congratulate me on the inheritance from a distant, deceased relative. The cover story was already in place, woven seamlessly into the fabric of the financial world. But the true nature of the contract, the real price of my compliance, became terrifyingly clear 3 weeks later. Holloway hadn't just purchased my silence, he had installed a mechanism to enforce it. The phone call came from a payphone in a small town in Missouri. It was Jameson. Riley, don't say a word, just listen to me, he said, his voice urgent and laced with paranoia. Chen didn't do it, I spoke to his girlfriend. He was about to go to the press. He'd already made contact with a reporter at the Washington Post. A week later, he's gone, and Rodriguez, that was no accident. His sister told me a black SUV ran him off the highway. He paused and I could hear him take a ragged breath. They're cleaning house, man, they're tying up all the loose ends. A wave of panic washed over me. I needed to warn him, to tell him to run, to disappear. The words formed in my mind, they know, get out, they're coming for you. But when I opened my mouth to speak, nothing happened, not a whisper, not a sound. My vocal cords felt paralyzed, frozen by some invisible force. It was as if a switch had been flipped deep inside my brain, severing the connection between thought and speech. I frantically grabbed a pen and a notepad, trying to scribble a warning, but my hand seized up in a violent, excruciating cramp, sending the pen flying across the room. Riley, are you still there? Jameson's voice was tight with fear. I know you signed. They told me you did, but I couldn't. I took the money, but I refused the final contract. They can't buy what we saw. The words I wanted to scream were trapped in the prison of my skull. The only sound I could force out was a pathetic, strangled utterance. Be safe, I managed to say. The words were hollow, meaningless, a betrayal of everything I wanted to convey. I'm going dark, brother, Jameson said. Tonight, some things are more important than safety. Someone has to be left to tell the story. The line went dead. It was the last time I ever heard from him. That same night my phone rang again. It was Melinda. Her voice was strained, terrified. Riley, there are men outside my building. They've been sitting in a car across the street for hours. They came to my door earlier, claimed they were FBI agents, but it felt wrong. They knew things, Riley, personal things. The baby's exact due date, my mother's maiden name. They even knew about that stupid fight we had before you deployed. Her voice cracked. What did you do over there? What kind of trouble are you in? I tried to explain, to tell her that this wasn't my fault, that I was trying to protect her, but the paralysis gripped my throat again. I can't, was all I could stammer out. You can't or you won't, she shot back, her fear instantly turning to bitter anger. They told me about the money, Riley. They told me you're a multimillionaire now. Is that it? Did you trade your family for a payday? Is that why you didn't even try to fight for us? I couldn't defend myself. The physical inability to speak the truth was my ultimate damnation. She hung up, convinced that I had sold her and our unborn child for a fortune. 6 months passed in a blur of sterile rehabilitation and empty luxury. Then, a small, unassuming package arrived by a courier who vanished before I could even ask for a name. Inside was a single flash drive and a handwritten note. It was from Jameson, the truth they paid to bury, dead man's Swick. H is active, use it well. The drive contained a trove of video files, clear, high-definition footage from the entire operation. It showed everything. It showed American-made chemical agents being tested on unarmed civilians in a small Afghan village not 20 miles from where we were hit. It showed the aftermath, bodies lying in the streets, a child's doll abandoned in the dust. The chemicals we were exposed to weren't Soviet-era relics. They were a new generation of weapon designed to mimic old Russian signatures for plausible deniability. Our unit hadn't been on an inspection. We had stumbled upon a cover-up. The IED wasn't random. It was meant to eliminate us. Smith and Jones weren't retrieving old stock. They were sanitizing a crime scene before international inspectors arrived. The evidence was damning, irrefutable, and utterly useless in my hands. Every attempt I made to share it triggered a violent physical response. Trying to upload the files caused seizures that left me thrashing on the floor. Trying to copy the drive led to blackouts that stole hours from my life. They hadn't just bought my silence, they had surgically installed it. During the operations in Germany, while they were saving my life and fitting my prosthetics, they had implanted a neural blocking device into my nervous system. It was science fiction made real, a technological leash that made me a prisoner in my own body. It has been 2 years since I signed that contract. I now reside in a penthouse apartment in Seattle on the 32nd floor with panoramic views of Puget Sound. My prosthetic legs are state-of-the-art, costing nearly $1 million. They allow me to run marathons, which I now do regularly, raising funds for veterans' charities. My donations are always funneled through layers of shell corporations, always anonymous. I've given away over $30 million, but it's like trying to empty the ocean with a teaspoon. The interest alone on my account generates more wealth than I could ever hope to spend. The money is a constant, mocking reminder of the price I paid. Melinda gave birth to a daughter 6 months after she left me. She named her Grace. My brother, Colton, sent me a single photograph before Melinda cut off all communication. Grace has my eyes and her mother's smile. She is a perfect, innocent life that will grow up never knowing her true father. Last year, Melinda married a physical therapist, a good man who specializes in helping wounded veterans. The irony is a cruel daily torment. He is the hero I pretend to be, while I live in my glass tower, a ghost haunted by the truth. I provide for them in the only way I can. Through anonymous third parties, I ensure Grace's school receives generous donations. A trust fund in her name, established by an unknown benefactor, awaits her when she turns 25. She will never struggle financially. She will have every opportunity I can secretly provide. But she will never have her father. My own father, Vernon, passed away 6 months ago from a fast-moving cancer. Standing at his funeral at Arlington National Cemetery, my mother clutched my hand. "I know you're carrying a heavy burden, Riley," she whispered. "Whatever it is, I want you to know that I am proud of you." The urge to tell her everything, to unburden my soul, was overwhelming. But the words turned to dust in my mouth, the neural block holding firm. Colton still sends me occasional emails, filled with pictures from family events I can never attend. He thinks my isolation is due to shame over my injuries. "No one cares about your legs, man," he wrote in his last message. "We just miss you." If he only knew that my legs were the smallest price I paid in those mountains. Jameson is now officially listed as missing, presumed dead. His family held a memorial service I was unable to attend. But every few months I receive a postcard from a remote, exotic location, a place with no extradition treaty with the United States. The postcards are always blank, save for a series of geographical coordinates written in tiny script on the stamp. I plot each one on a map, forming a constellation of freedom, a trail left by a ghost who got away. I pray that he finds a way to tell the truth that I am physically incapable of speaking. This is what $278 million buys, a life of luxurious isolation. Every human connection I have is built upon a foundation of lies. My personal assistant believes I'm a tech millionaire who got lucky with cryptocurrency. When she asked about my legs, the lie came easily. A motorcycle accident. It flowed from my lips, smooth and effortless, because it wasn't a classified truth. The neural block didn't care about that lies. The most painful part is the knowledge that the program continues. Somewhere, those weapons are still being produced. Other villages will be erased, their deaths attributed to insurgent activity or unfortunate accidents. The next special operations unit that stumble. Ease upon the truth will be faced with the same impossible choice. Last week, a young Marine, fresh from Walter Reed and missing an arm, approached me in a coffee shop. "Sir," he said, "I recognize you from the stories about your unit. We're deploying to a similar region next month. Do you have any advice?" I wanted to grab him by the shoulders and scream. I wanted to tell him to run, to desert, to do anything to avoid my fate. But all I could manage to say was the hollow, pre-approved platitude. "Just come home safe, soldier." He smiled, thanked me for my service, and walked away. As he left, I saw him, a man in a black suit across the street, watching me with the same dead eyes as Holloway. They are always watching, ensuring their investment remains profitable and above all silent. They didn't buy my silence for $278 million. They bought my soul, and they got it for a bargain.